There's some controversy about just how many thoughts we have in a day. Some people believe it is about 6,200, others believe it is closer to 70,000 or even 80,000. So, however many thoughts you think you have, maybe you're at the higher end of that, and this is why you're watching this video. So, overthinking or intrusive thoughts, which are the thoughts that pop up and they're disturbing or they're catastrophizing or they are about things that we don't necessarily want to be thinking about, but they continue to come up. This can be so challenging. And if you are caught in a stream of consciousness that sounds like catastrophizing or intrusive, challenging thoughts right now, I am sending you compassion. Hope you can take a minute of care for yourself while watching this and throughout. And I hope this video will help you. So, first, recognize that we are not our thoughts. So, what is the purpose of thinking if it is not who we are? Thoughts often come up because it gives us a sense of control. It gives us a sense of knowing what is happening or predicting what is happening or dwelling or stewing or marinating on what happened in the past. And in some way, it gives us a perceived sense of control. So, as humans, we really like control for a pseudo sense of safety. Maybe you were somebody, and we'll talk about how this shows up in early years, but somebody who has always been a thinker or has always been almost kind of like a type A personality or prone toward those things where you're prepared and always on the ball and always thinking about something. And that has really paid off in helpful ways in your life and not so helpful ways in your life, which is why maybe you're watching this video. We think to avoid feeling. So, another reason, another purpose of thoughts is to avoid feeling. Going to say this again. We think, we go into our minds, analyzing, intellectualizing, predicting, judging, to avoid feeling something in our body or emotional world. So maybe we learn that emotions have not been safe. Maybe we don't feel comfortable being in the body in that sphere. I have a video all about dysregulation and former wounding and how that can show up that I definitely suggest you check out if this is resonating with you. Really, we think because it pulls us out of the present moment. So, if we have wounding, if we have painful memories, if we have experiences that tell us it is not safe to be in the present, you need to think, you need to get out of this moment and kind of detach from it in a way that we are fully in our mind. So, we're not really in the present, in our life, in our experience, in the room now. Sitting here talking with you, we might be thinking about the future or thinking about the past or thinking about all these should haves or would haves or could haves or what ifs or how can I shift this or how can I change this or what can I do or what do I need to do? It pulls us out of being. So, very often we learn that being is not a safe, secure place to be. So, maybe in the past you were being your delightful self, maybe playing as a kid, and maybe it was perceived as unruly or too silly or out of control or chaotic. So, somebody said, nope, don't do that, kind of shut it down. You might have internalized that, oh, it is not okay to be my authentic, true self. So I will go into my mind and design this other self or other parts of myself that can shut down those ways that I was being or shut down what is true to me. There's a way to do this with showing up in a helpful way so we can both honor parts of ourselves and show up to what we need to. But very often we learn early on that it is not okay to fully be. So if I think about what allows us to fully be, it's having psychological rest and somebody that can delight in us for being versus doing. So when we have somebody that is delighting in us for being, we develop this foundation of security and safety in being ourselves because we've been seen for who we are authentically. And that allows us to show up in the world in a way that is helpful and authentic to us versus shutting down parts and trying to protect and stay safe and going into that overthinking mind where many of us can live, if not most of it. So we think when we have learned that it is not safe, secure, or okay to just be and be ourselves authentically. So doing versus being becomes the norm. So thinking gives us a sense of doing. It gives us a sense of familiarity. It gives us a sense of producing something, even if we're not really productive or isn't really effective or helpful. Next is that thoughts start in the body. So often we think that we can control our thoughts and if we could just think differently or change them or shift them, we would all be okay and comfortable. And it can be really challenging. While definitely there is a place for cognitive behavioral therapy or acceptance and commitment therapy, which I love. And as an occupational therapist, I'm thinking, how do we get in the body, in the being, in the body and emotional world, which is actually where our thoughts begin. So the state of our body, Deb Dana and Stephen Porges do a lot of work on the polyvagal theory and how the state of our body determines our thoughts. Our state determines our story. So that's Deb Dana's quote on how our physiological happenings, and this is really aligned with sensory integration, which is a big specialty interest area of mine, how we're perceiving, how we're taking in the world or having difficulty taking in the world will determine our thoughts. So 80% of communication goes from our body to our brain, not vice versa. Meaning, if right now I was bothered by the sound of something outside, or if I'm overwhelmed by kids screaming and it triggers this sense of threat in my nervous system, then I might jump to my mind and start thinking that, oh my goodness, this kid's out of control, or this environment is out of control. I need to do, or I need to fix, or I need to punish, or I need to take action to make this stop because this is not okay. This is not secure. Instead of maybe regulating that sense of threat in myself and helping my body and my brain to know that, okay, this feels uncomfortable. That noise, that whine, that scream triggered this intense feeling in my body, in my sensory world. And it's saying threat, survive, have a stress response. So maybe it pulls me into fight, flight, freeze. But then instead of noticing that in my nervous system, it's telling my thoughts. And my thoughts might start to spiral. And then my thoughts create an emotional response. So 20% of the information is our thoughts that can trigger stress in the body. And the cycle just continues on and on and on. And we get stuck in this stress emotional cycle. We get stuck in this dysregulation. So not only do we have intrusive thoughts, not only are we overthinking, but we're contributing to the cycle that isn't a healthy way to move through an emotional cycle. It actually keeps us stuck and it's exhausting and it's draining. And we are not wired to live in this over time. So it can cause chronic stress, actually, is what it can cause over time. So we interpret sensations to give us a sense of control. So when we have those thoughts that start in the body, so again, they start as a sensation in the body. So let's say my heart was racing, or my chest feels tense, or my stomach feels upset or uncomfortable. And then I have a thought that I don't ever want to do public speaking, for example. So because I have this thought in my stomach, I might have or this feeling in my stomach, I might have a thought that I should never do public speaking. This is what it's telling me. It's too uncomfortable to be aware of that. It's too uncomfortable to notice that. So another way to think about that is how our triggers become our teachers. So when we have a sensation in the body, when we're triggered, when we're activated, and maybe trigger is too big of a word for this public speaking moment, but it can be really indicative of former past experiences that maybe something happened. So maybe it wasn't public speaking, but maybe it was a time that you were living shamelessly yourself. So you were being your full self, expressing yourself, maybe dancing around or singing, and somebody really rejected you or criticized you, or kids at school just jumped on you and made fun of you or bullied you or gave you all the reasons that you shouldn't be dancing, or how you looked ridiculous, or how you were ugly, or how you were too much. This painful experience can be stored as that body sensation. So our wounds are stored as reactions. And then our reactions become our thoughts. I'm going to say that again. Our wounds are stored as reactions and sensations. So our limbic system, our memories, our brain areas store these responses, these reactions rather. So when we think about public speaking today, all of those old protective responses come up that say, absolutely not. Do not make yourself seen. It isn't okay to get up there and talk. This is not helpful. This is not okay. And our sensations of our body actually spiral to our mind to then assign meaning to it. So we feel the sensation, and our mind might say, nope, no public speaking for me. So when we become aware of our thoughts, become aware of our body sensation, we have so much power to shift. So the good news is, helpful news is, there's so much that we can do, so much that you can do, even starting now, starting today, to rewire those reactions. So we're repatterning those responses, those reactions that are coming up, and enabling our ability instead of react. So instead of react to thoughts, we can respond to our thoughts. Our thoughts are not facts. Our thoughts are very often not true about us, not true about others. They are information. Our feelings that go along with those thoughts are also not facts. Feelings are incredibly important. Emotions are wisdom to listen to, and sensations in the body to listen to and to pay attention to. And they are very often not true. They are very often not facts. Now, what to do about this? So if you're watching and you're thinking, oh my goodness, intrusive thoughts and overthinking and detaching from my body sensory world, this is me. Hello, this is what I'm struggling with. Here are some ways that we can move from here. So the first is sensory regulation. Sensory regulation is when we are connecting with our body at a sensory embodied level. Some of you might not feel safe or secure enough to go into the body, or this might not seem relevant, and that's okay. Meet yourself where you are and trust your path. For me, I was somebody that did take some time to connect with the body. And while I was doing all the helpful things, I still wasn't doing it from an embodied level. I was doing it from a lens of, this is good for me. I should do this, instead of, wow, this is really a moment for me to step in my body and feel safe and secure. So, depending on your past wounding or past wiring, you may not feel safe to be in the body and in that emotional body, I call the heart space. So, really taking time and meeting yourself where you are and considering all of this as information, while also trusting that we can change so rapidly as humans. One day we might not feel comfortable, or we might not have the capacity, and the next day we may. So, allowing yourself to be a new version of yourself and allow that wiring to shift. Our brains are totally able to change and expand and develop and nurture yourself over time. So sensory regulation is when we are telling our body, our animal body. So I'll use animal bodies a lot because while we're humans, we are very much coming from these parts of our brains that can be animalistic. And what makes us different is our ability to be aware of those animalistic urges and instincts and needs, and to respond to them. So when we think about thoughts being as when we think about thoughts as originating in the body, what I might do as a current practice is, I'm even trying to do it now, settling in, noticing my body, my surroundings. So thinking again about those animal bodies, when we start to orient to our environment, so maybe looking all the way to the right, looking all the way to the left, looking around the room, just notice what happens to your body. If you want to pause the video and continue this, if this feels relevant, go ahead and do that now. For those who are here with us, we will then practice moving. So any way that your body feels called to move, maybe it's rolling shoulders, maybe it's rolling neck. Not only does this ground in the body, but it gives our body sensory input. So my specialty or my interest is really seeing how sensory can influence our cognition, can influence our thoughts. So if we are tense and tight and constricted or nervous, then 80% of the information that's going to our mind is likely telling our mind that there's a threat, or we are needing to protect in some way, versus being in this place of softening and being, and this connect area. connecting with ourselves, connecting with others. So when we go through the sensory regulation process, every nervous system is as unique as a fingerprint when it comes to sensory regulation. So what you need and what I need may be extremely different. So for me, I'll share some of what I do, and you can get an idea of how to use these sensory systems and how to use our senses to ground and remind the body that, oh, I don't need to be so tense and constricted and tight. And there are things that I can do. There are tools that I have to move through this. So we can remind our body that I don't need to be so constricted and tense and tight. And, or maybe there is a reason that you need to be. Maybe your environment is not truly supportive or your environment is threatening and that needs to shift. So that's always a disclaimer to look at. But really thinking about, okay, so for me, vestibular input, a sensory system that is lesser known and that I will share lots more about here. If you want to know, let me know in the comments if this would be interesting to you. Vestibular system is in our inner ear. There are five vestibular receptors. So semicircular canals, for example, with fluid in them that move back and forth and ideally are very mobile. But as we get older and as our emotional stress increases, it gets harder to process vestibular information and vice versa. So if my head is stuck in one place, it can actually send signals to the body that we are not as safe and secure. Or it can feel threatening to activate your vestibular system. So really simple way to get vestibular movement is to move your head side to side, to move your head around, roll the neck, to go upside down, which I won't do here because I might knock the microphone over, but going upside down or inverting your body to get your head in all different positions can be really helpful. Another way is spinning. So we can spin, we can move our head up, down, side to side. Acceleration, deceleration can be really activating and organizing, or it can be dysregulating. So the intensity, duration, and frequency of this can look much different. So sensory regulation can tell the body that we are secure in space, we are secure in the environment from a nervous system level. So when I say secure or safe, maybe you're like, Katie, oh my goodness, I'm totally safe. I'm in my house. I'm in this, home that I feel totally comfortable in. What do you mean safe? Obviously I'm safe, but your nervous system can feel triggered or ignited or activated or unsafe, even when our surroundings are safe. So this is where maybe you're familiar with CPTSD or the wounding that can come up, or our neuroception, which is our nervous system communication that's picking up and saying, hey, I'm not safe. There's something alerting here, even if factually our environment is safe at the time. So we're really working with those core reactions, and vestibular input is a way of regulating the body from a sensory level. Other things that we can do is ground in the room. So using our visual system, again, going back to the scanning the environment or naming objects in the room. See a plant or looking at a picture, maybe looking outside at the leaves on the trees fluttering in the breeze, or finding a bird or a squirrel, maybe eating off your fall decor like they are eating mine. So we can do all these things that are grounding us in the environment, noticing the floor beneath you or the chair beneath you, noticing what you smell, what you taste, what you hear the wind outside. I hear a lot of quiet, which is nice. And this is all sending signals to our body and grounding in that body sensory world that we so often detach from somewhere along the way, because maybe it's through punishment or feeling rejection or feeling abandonment or those or physically being harmed in some way, if this has happened to you. Other ways that we can regulate and ground the body is humming, singing. These all activate a nerve that really connects to multiple areas of our body. And the more that we practice these, the more strong that nerve can become in automatically noticing, becoming aware, and regulating the sensory world. So this is all sensory regulation. I think this will be more and more popular as the years go by, because we are just starting to really tap in and understand the full impact. Ayres was the founder of the whole sensory integration philosophy. I think she was just brilliant and way ahead of her time. And I think it will be continuously important when it comes to anxiety, overthinking, intrusive thoughts, depression, all these mental health challenges that we navigate, and even relationship wounds. So, all of the triggers that we have, it can be so helpful to connect from a sensory level with the body. And then get to emotional regulation. So, emotional regulation is all about recognizing what emotion might be there. So, again, we're really interpreting sensations in the body. But one way that we can start to identify what emotion is there is by recognizing what we feel like. So, for example, if I feel like throwing a bowling ball out the window, it's probably a good sign that I'm feeling angry on the inside. If I feel like avoiding, procrastinating, or I'm really in my mind overthinking, it can be a sign that I feel fear. Maybe I'm avoiding, I'm hiding, I'm running away, either literally or uh, figuratively speaking. So, starting to look at what we feel like doing and then looking at the actions that are there can start to tell us, oh, I'm feeling some fear here. Maybe there's something to think about, there's something to observe. And then we can figure out how this can teach us about what we need to regulate, what we need to communicate, and really think, okay, how can we move through this emotion in a healthy versus unhelpful way? Is there somebody that we need to share our needs with? Is there somebody that we need to request something of? Do we need to share a limit in our life? Are we feeling anger or resentment because we're constantly giving, constantly doing, constantly over or bulldozing through our own boundaries, and then you're feeling resentment or anger as a result? So it's a signal that we need to set a limit or share a need or adjust something in our life. Are we feeling fear or shame? And this is a cocktail that tends to come up often, is this fear, shame, guilt, kind of what I'll call emotional cocktail. Because when we have this emotional cocktail come up, it can spiral, it can trigger all these old things in the past. So if somebody, for example, does something to lose or betray your trust in the present moment, it can activate all of these old times that you maybe felt terrified because you had maybe a parent, teacher, coach, caregiver, some adult in your life that did something that was really hurtful. So maybe they made fun of you in a room full of people and that wasn't typical, or maybe that was typical and that was equally harmful. And this action of betrayal that happened over time without repair, without any amends, without any ability to make sense of it, then, in the present moment, when we feel this same emotion, it can bring up this whole emotional flashback almost, or emotional cocktail of all of these deeper things that need to be integrated and are coming up to say, hey, maybe I'm ready now to be seen, heard, felt, soothed, moved through, co regulated, because in the past, there wasn't any space for that. So I'm still trying to make sense in my body. So overthinking or intrusive thoughts can come up because our body is saying, okay, this is still here. This is still something that I'm trying to work through. And here is how I'm going to show you the behavior that can come from it, overthinking. Intrusive thoughts can either be helpful or it can be really hindering. So, really keeping that in mind. Then, thinking about co regulation. So, we have sensory regulation, emotional regulation, and thinking about, do we need co regulation? So when we are dysregulated, and I really see overthinking or intrusive thoughts as a sense of dysregulation. Dysregulation is when our nervous system has a sensation and we don't actually have an organized, helpful response that can come from that. So instead of having a thought and letting it float on by and thinking, okay, thanks, thought. I appreciate you're trying to keep me safe. I appreciate you're trying to keep me protected here, but I don't need you. You can float on by. Instead of that, it takes a hold on our system and we get caught in that stress cycle. So, dysregulation is when we have a disorganized response, and don't take shame or guilt for this because this is an entirely human thing that happens and it's very protective. So, it's actually a brilliant mechanism, overthinking, that has kept you safe, probably, and productive at some point in your life, or kept you from being productive in a way that felt safe at the time. Maybe you're recognizing now that you don't need it anymore. So our thoughts can take a ton of energy, and we're wired to get co-regulation. When we're dysregulated, we're wired to get co-regulation. So that means seeking support from somebody. And I want you to think about, are you somebody that is rigid boundaries, keeps everybody at arm's length, never goes to anyone for help or sharing your story? Or do you over rely on others and need them to make any decision or to regulate anything that comes up, any sense of stress, any sense of discomfort? And between those two, again, it's a big spectrum. We never fit fully into one. Depends on the relationship and context. And there is a lot that we can do within that. So if you are more rigid boundaries, maybe for co-regulation this time, is there one person that you would feel comfortable sharing a little bit of your story or this thought that you're having? So maybe it's a friend, a therapist, a counselor, even a recovery room, somewhere that you can get a non-judgmental response. Or you can feel comfortable enough and like there's reciprocity enough to say, hey, that wasn't helpful. Here's really what I need right now. So going to even one person, because we're not wired to hold it all ourselves. Trust me, I've tried. Our brains are social organs and we are wired to connect and share. And while we may have developed this overthinking capacity in order to do everything on our own, it can often be really exhausting. And it can result in unexplained health challenges and unexplained emotional struggles that really can be lightened and lessened when we allow ourselves to lean into co-regulation in safe enough places with trusted enough people. Next is thinking, okay, if you're somebody that over relies on everybody or kind of this consistently oversharing and it isn't really productive or helpful, maybe you get judgmental responses or you get abandoned or left or rejected or somebody uses it against you, thinking about sharing maybe what you need from somebody. So, hey, I know I usually go to you and want you to fix my feelings or fix this for me, but really today I just wondering if you could listen for me or listen to me. I'm wondering if you could just listen, be a sounding board while I talk through this and try to process and really just listen to me while I'm sharing. So, to put this all together, I was having a conversation with a friend recently who has this recurring thought that she's a terrible parent. She is parenting three young kids. She is in these early years that can be so demanding and stressful. And what she shared was that she continues to have this thought that whenever she has a tough moment, so she'll have a tough moment and use a sharp tone or yell at her kids, or there's something that happens that is not aligned with her values. And then her thoughts kick into overdrive. And she cannot turn off the thoughts of her being a bad parent, a bad mom, and almost demonizing herself. So, this thought is like an inner critic that's constantly this mental chatter, this monkey mind that comes in and is saying, you're a bad parent. You need to do better. You messed up. Your relationship is over. It's going to be just like the relationship you had with your mom, which is not existent at this time. Continuous monkey mind thoughts that come up. And I say monkey mind because it's that kind of reactive, impulsive chatter that comes up that feels very intrusive. It's like we have a monkey on our back that's just saying these things and getting in the mind, and it's not helping anybody. It's keeping everybody in a stress cycle. It's keeping everybody in that emotional cocktail. So, what we talked through was going through this process and really just being a sounding board for her while she worked through and realized that, huh, I am realizing that all of those same fears or sense of abandonment or rejection or that deep pain of being disconnected from my own mother when I needed the connection the most is all coming up around this relationship with my children. So, yes, some of it was feeling guilt with yelling or stepping out of bounds or the sharp tone, but it was also bringing up all these other layers of being disconnected when she really needed the connection the most. So, I tell this story because for any of us, our emotions can be insights and information, and our emotions often lead to those thoughts, those intrusive thoughts that come up and will just spiral out of control unless we can step outside of ourselves and notice or observe that our thoughts are not truly who we are. Our thoughts are not true about us often, and they're not true about others. So instead of labeling our thoughts as good, bad, right, or wrong, recognizing that you are not your thoughts. And we can look at them as information to integrate things that may be ready. Before we end, I want to give a practice for you. So if you have a pen and paper nearby, take it out. Take a minute to write down any thoughts you're having right now. So just stream of consciousness, write down your thoughts. So if you need to pause this video for a minute to do that, go ahead. And then when we write down the stream of consciousness thoughts, start to identify what emotions, what sensations are wrapped up and connected to those thoughts. And just start there. So we are starting to develop space between our thoughts and who we actually are, or our truth, or what this means. So we detach and we observe and we notice, and this is where consciousness begins. And this is where we start to rewire those reactive spirals and cycles that we get in over time. So, intrusive thoughts, starting there. I have another video all about anxiety in kids, and that can give a lot of information about how anxiety may have shown up as overthinking or intrusive thoughts in yourself and where it all began. So, again, understanding our story can be so powerful when it comes to being able to step outside of that story or shift that story in ways that are helpful, not just for you, but in the ways that you're showing up in the world, ways that you're living your purpose and connected to a values based way of living in a way that feels true to you versus everybody else's voices and expectations aside. So, comment with any questions and topic ideas from here. And I would love to hear from you. Subscribe, stick around, more to come.